Holy God, we are thankful to be able to meet together despite all that is around us, that we have this time to fellowship together, to study together, to pray together, to worship together. Lord, I just want to lift up, there are many that are dealing with illnesses, challenges, pain, and various other matters that are consuming. I know that several of us, for whatever the reason, woke up and didn't go back to sleep last night. And so I just ask you that we would always be so well trained to just take hold of your strength regardless. And may our faith endure whatever we have to endure. Some are dealing with some really big challenges. And I pray for strength always for the endurance, and that we get through this, and that your mercy would be upon us. And as we continue now the last study on Babylon, on the counterfeit, we just ask you to guide us and direct us, to help us. Lord, we hear the words, we have some understanding, but there is such depth to your word, and I know that things go over my head at times, and I'm sure that I'm not alone. Lord, may we apply everything we have to hear what you're saying and to understand it, and become the teachers that you've called us to be. We lift up the Levites and the Nethinims, that they be ready to hear your wonderful words of truth and the fearful warning. May we be giving a message that causes offense, that pricks the hearts, and trust that your people will hear and understand. May you continue to lead us and strengthen us in this work, filling us with wisdom, courage, humility, and faith. We thank you. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, let me get my screen up here. There it is. Okay. Okay, now you can see it, right?
Yes.
So this is part 3 from the Oceana camp meeting. Will you think like a Millerite or like a Catholic? I want to move that thing off the top, but then I always forget how to put it back on when it's time. I don't forget, I just, it's a memory thing. Okay, so this continuing from what we did last night, part 3, we're going to complete our look at the rise of modern Babylon. We drew up in our last presentation the Alpha of Israel and the Alpha of Babylon. And we saw that they both went through times of scattering. We had the scattering here and gathering, and then scattering, and then gathering, and then scattering again. We believe that Babylon was rising when the Lateran Treaty was signed. We know that that was sometime after 1899. I don't remember if we went into the date in the last presentation or not. We do here, or I think we do. But I think we're all familiar with the date. So all we have done is expand. So what we saw that they both went through the times of scattering. We believe that Babylon was rising when the Lateran Treaty was signed. All we have done is expand on that to see the patterns of scattering and gathering, scattered, gathered, and then scattered again, a counterfeit. And that has all been taught before. We're going to complete our look at the rise of modern Babylon. We drew up in our last presentation the Alpha of Israel and the Alpha of Babylon. Give me just 1 second, guys. Okay. All we have done is expand on that and see the patterns of scattering and gathering, okay, as a counterfeit. So, and that has all been taught before. We're going to complete our look. Let's see. I don't know what's advancing. Sorry about that. I wanted to add a few things. First, I wanted to make the point more strongly that you can't have a reform line for the beginning of modern Babylon, because if God's people don't have that understanding, Satan doesn't have it. And he can create nothing of his own. And that was the first new point. The second point I wanted to make was really anticipating questions. Where is the true Lateran Treaty? So there's a Lateran Treaty here. Where's the true Lateran Treaty? And if we're going to compare and contrast, that is a major waymark that you don't see on our line. Now it's not that people are asking that question, I'm just anticipating it. But if you did ask, my answer would be the following. 1818 for us is only a prophetic message, an internal spiritual restoration. 1917 is more complicated. The complication comes in when you see what Satan has to do. You don't see Miller have to work with earthly governments. This is God restoring the church. And then this here is Satan restoring church and state. And that's the contrast. So only a restoration of the church, and this is restoring of church and state. So you can't come here and see a parallel for the Lateran Treaty. That's where you'll see how they are different. The third point I want to make was to add 2 predictions for each history. The only real external political event that the Millerites predicted is 1840. And the only sign of the end of the world in their history was the falling stars. We saw the other signs were previous. The only external political event that the counterfeit here predict is World War II. And the signs of the times is considered by them to be the Fatima storm. And that was the third point of this theme. The fourth is bringing in the second, or really the first leader of their history. John the Baptist paved the way, and then came Christ. And at the very end, John the Baptist dies. William Miller did a lot of work, paved the way, and at the end, he rejected. I would argue that Pius XI paved the way for Pius XII, the Pope of World War II. But at the end of his life, Pius XI rejects, he regrets everything he's done before. So I mean, for me, I had to think this through as she was going through this, because Eugenio Pacelli was here. Eugenio Pacelli, we were showing last night, he's actually Pius XII. But Pius XI paves the way for Pius XII. So Pacelli's not a pope here. He's not a pope until in the time of Hitler. I think we all know that. When we bring in Pius XI, it forces us to not just see the interactions between the Vatican and the King of the North, the Vatican and Germany. Now we see the Vatican and Italy. And just one point, Germany is still the King of the North. We can trace that, but you see it as has an inseparable partner, Mussolini. They're quite inseparable. So when you switch it today in a history of success, who is the King of the South? So if everybody remembers that from back in all the times we've done Guadalupe and other places where she showed that they switch in a history of success. So who is the King of the South? And now it's Putin in Russia. But Putin he's got a friend or an ally. Has he got a friend or an ally? In some ways a rival, but they have each other's back. You had Hitler and Mussolini. Russia is the King of the South, but he's not alone. And I would argue that that is where we introduce China. But we aren't talking about China at this camp meeting, and I just wanted to make that point. If we're talking about Italy here and tracing it prophetically, even though it isn't the King of the North, China, now you know how we can approach China. So Pius XI, you have Pius XI and Mussolini in the history of Italy. So she's telling us, you can take this to the comparing of Pius and Mussolini to then, if I'm understanding correctly, you guys help me ask the question, to Pius XI and Mussolini to the king of the South of our day, Russia, and has a friend or an ally, China. That's not necessarily a friend, but an ally. Is that what I get out of that, you guys? Anybody?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Okay. Well, I'm trying to make sure that I understand correctly what she said there. That she's looking at, we know that Germany is the king of the North. And you have Germany and you have the Vatican. But prior to that, you have Italy and the Vatican. And she's taking Italy and the Vatican, Mussolini and Pius XI, and switching it for a history of success in our time, and saying that the king of the South is this, I don't know if union is the right word, but you have Pius XI and Mussolini working together, that she's making this comparison of Putin, Russia, working with China, not friends, but an ally. They're there. So that's how I understood that. Anybody else?
So in that relationship,
David says yes.
That was a yes from somebody?
from David.
From
Yeah,
David?
David. You're speaking Chinese to me, but he understands it.
Okay.
In that relationship with Hitler and Mussolini, is Hitler the king of the North and Mussolini the king of the South, or are they just allies?
Say that again.
Is Hitler the king of the North and Mussolini the king of the South, or are they just allies?
She's not saying that Mussolini's the king of the South, because Mussolini's actually working with the Vatican, right? But we know that there's a church state power, so there's a state power king of the North and then a church power king of the North that work together.
Okay.
And she's saying that Germany is still the king of the North, but she's taken us to this history that leads up to Germany and Hitler working with the Vatican. And so this history is the history of Mussolini, that Mussolini, and she says Pius XI paves the way for Pius XII and what they do in working with fascism to protect the church. So then what she's pointing out here, though, is that let's see, we can trace it, but you can see it, you see it has an inseparable partner in Mussolini. The king of the North has Germany, the king of the North has an inseparable partner, Mussolini, that they're quite inseparable, Germany and Hitler and Mussolini. So when you switch that in a history of success, who's the king of the South? And that, she says, is Putin and Russia, which we know. But has Russia, Putin, got a friend or an ally? In some ways, he's a rival, but they have each other's back. China and Russia, they have each other's back. You had Hitler and Mussolini. Russia is the king of the South, but he's not alone. And I would argue, so she's saying Hitler and Mussolini are inseparable. And she's saying for the king of the South in our day that Putin and China are inseparable.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Susan asked a question on the chat, and I'm wondering about the same thing. And that, okay, so what I'm confused about is Hitler or Mussolini and Pope Pius is church and state. I mean, I can see that they're allies, but they're also church and state. So how does church and state, I mean, with China and Russia, I mean, I don't see church and state.
I don't think she's making the point of church and state. I think she's making the point of how Mussolini and Hitler are inseparable. They have each other's back. one paves the way to the other.
Okay, so
I
then,
hope I'm saying that right.
so it's not the connection between Mussolini and the Pope. It's a connection between Hitler and Mussolini.
If I understand correctly, because she's saying Germany is still the king of the North, we can trace that, but you see it as has an inseparable partner, Mussolini. So if I understand that statement, Germany represents Hitler, the king of the North. Germany, Hitler, king of the North, kingdom, right?
Okay,
So Germany and Mussolini is what she's linking, and how they're inseparable. Meaning,
okay, so
One- well, she said-
Germany,
go ahead.
so Germany and Italy were not friends?
She is saying Germany is the king of the North. I don't know that I don't know that each one of those things would apply. The point that I get out of it, if I'm getting it right, is that Germany is the king of the North and he has a partner, Mussolini. And that, and then she does go on to say, where does she say it? She goes on to say Russia, but has he got a friend, an ally? So I don't know if if she means the word friend ally to Germany and Mussolini, how she's wording that, but she's just pointing out that the two are inseparable in the work that they do. That's the best that I understood. That's why I asked how everybody else understood that. I get what she's saying about in the history of success, you're going to switch that and you're going to now look at the king of the South instead of the king of the North. But if I follow what she said here, she's connecting the inseparableness of Germany and Mussolini. Germany is the king of the North, but you can see that Germany has an inseparable partner, Mussolini. So Putin is the king of the South, but he has an inseparable partner or ally, which is China.
Okay,
Rivals, but they have each other's back. So maybe that's the part that you were asking. Were Germany and Italy rivals? Is that what you were asking?
right. Okay, well, thank you for the clarification.
Hopefully we have it right. Just switching it and showing the connection between, and she says that she would argue that's where China is introduced as the inseparable partner of the king of the South, Russia, Putin. Anybody else? Because I know that was kind of confusing to me when I had to listen to these last two presentations quite a bit because there were things that was hard to pick up. And some things, the way they were worded, I was struggling with. So did everybody else okay understand that? At least the connection the connection that she made.
If we keep our understanding basic to what you're describing about this inseparable partner or ally, then it's right. But I think that the problem that some are having is we want to look at it and try to read more into it than what she was just trying to make that simple comparison.
Okay, yeah, because you compare and contrast, and not everything is going to be exact. If that's what you're saying.
Yeah,
That's exactly
from what
what I was
Bob's,
saying.
excuse me. Sorry. So it's not about a church-state relationship with Putin and China. We
No,
know that.
no,
But they have each other covered.
right.
They're working for the benefit of each other.
Well, they're working for probably the benefit of themselves, but
Themselves, yes.
but like with others, they need the other to accomplish what they want.
Yeah, exactly. That describes it well.
So are we all clear? Or as clear as can be on that?
Yes.
Okay.
But on the slide previous, Elaine, didn't it say church and state? Because that's where I think my mind started thinking about it. Or maybe you didn't say it.
Might have been.
When we were talking about Mussolini working, laying the groundwork with the Vatican, somewhere
Yeah,
I
but
got
there's a
that church and
difference.
state.
But the church and state relationship is just that, Mussolini and the Vatican, and Germany and the Vatican. But the comparison she's making here is Germany and Mussolini, Hitler and Mussolini.
Yeah,
One followed the other.
I get it.
One set up things for fascism, and the other one, that's when it's, you know, goes into the Holocaust. Which
Yeah,
I'll other
I
thoughts, but
I
I'll
get it.
next. I don't want to explore stuff I don't understand yet, but definitely brings other thoughts. Okay, okay, so I think we at least got that
Thank
second
you.
point. Okay. Okay, so we read a Catholic quote that says, no Italian government, and perhaps no government in the world, could have done so much in favor of the Catholic religion in a single year than Mussolini. Church and state, right? So a couple of points to make before we continue. We just need to understand the application. So we got La Civiltà Cattolica, the publication by the Jesuits that began, I think it said 1850, somewhere in there. And then Cardinal Gaspari. So we want to understand that. We're going to introduce Gaspari. At the very beginning of Mussolini's leadership, he had a secret meeting with Gaspari. Gaspari came in one entrance and Mussolini came in the other. This was the first formal meeting. This was the first formal meeting between Mussolini and Catholic leadership. In those beginning days, they came to an agreement. Mussolini, Pius XI, they would communicate through a mediator, the Jesuit priest Pietro Tucci Venturi. And this is the second of the two men that we need to know. So we see on the right-hand side, you see Pius XI, the Mussolini, and the liaison was Venturi. And he was a Jesuit priest. He never had a formal leadership position that reflected how influential and powerful he was. And just to quote his Wikipedia page, he was a Jesuit priest and historian who served as the unofficial liaison between Mussolini and Pius XI and Pius XII. He became known as Mussolini's confessor. One German newsletter would refer to him as Mussolini's Rasputin. Rasputin, if we remember from Russia, was the spiritual guide behind Tsar Nicholas, especially the wife of Tsar Nicholas. So he's the spiritual leader, spiritual guide for Mussolini, if I'm understanding that correctly. Many people became very jealous of this man because no other such ambassador had more meetings, such frequent meetings with Mussolini. They met at least monthly to negotiate between the Italian government and the Vatican. So it took about 4 years for Mussolini to dismantle democracy. Perhaps it wasn't quite as manic as Hitler, but it was often through violence and control. And through those 4 years, his greatest aid was Vatican support. So it's through violence and control, and his greatest aid is Vatican support. The influence Vatican support carried in a country that was 99% Catholic. We know that to get Hitler into full power, Pacelli dismantled the Catholic Center Party. Italy also had a Catholic Center Party, and the Vatican did the same thing, dismantled it to give Mussolini full control. But what we want to discuss are the compromises, the racism, the church state. That kind of reminded me of, because I chose on that list, the purging of the Republican Party. So they have to dismantle the Center Party in order for Hitler to come into full power. So Pietro Tucci Venturi, who was the go-between, and we're going to quote from something from an interaction he had with Mussolini in 1926, quoting, "In a document drafted in the summer of 1926, Venturi identified the worldwide Jewish Masonic plutocracy as the greatest enemy the church faced. He called for strong government measures, including a special secret police to monitor Italy's Jewish bankers. Hang on one second again, sorry guys. He called for strong government measures, including a special secret police to monitor Italy's Jewish bankers. The government should also abolish the stock exchange, which he dubbed the most potent means of the occult empire. And because the world's press was almost entirely in the hands of the Jews and the Masons, governments needed to limit freedom of the press in all matters dealing with business and finance. They had to recognize that the Jewish Masonic plutocracy lay at the root of all the world's economic and political problems. So this is the Vatican speaking to Mussolini, telling Mussolini what he has to do to take care of the Jews. Now, I don't believe that Walter Weiss thinks that he is racist when he talks about the Rothschilds and those ancient Jewish bankers, just because he doesn't say that they're Jewish. And then he talks about those Masons and implies they're all background friends with the Vatican. Walter Weiss' occult empire that you don't hear the press talk about, because the people who control the press are part of that deep state occult. All Weiss has done is repeat century-old Vatican propaganda. Remove the word Jewish, the same propaganda Hitler used to justify the Holocaust. I was reviewing this during lunch, and that statement kind of stuck out of me because I know a lot of us watched him, and I'm just thinking in the previous slide, I could, remembering back on the things that what he taught, this is telling us the very same things he taught. And I remember him not, using the word Jew, the Jewish people in here, but this statement here that it's the same propaganda that Hitler used to justify the Holocaust, and to think a lot of us watched Walter Weiss, and that's, I don't know, just kind of, I don't know, shocking. I don't know if this is the right word is, but that's what we were listening to, as someone who's repeating the same things that that Hitler used. Some of us might know the company Weight Watchers. It's really targeting women, though it's men and women. It's Weight Watchers, how mostly women get skinny. They changed their name last year to WW, and when they were asked what WW means, they said it doesn't mean anything. But now they advertise with that headline, Wellness That Works. Has the company changed? Nothing about that company has changed. They are still there to get women to lose weight, but it's not really nice to use the words anymore, Weight Watchers. They don't want people to lose completely the sight of their brand because they're known by this name, so you'll still find it in other parts of their page. But the language has changed. You can't say weight loss anymore. You can say weight care. You can't say weight loss. It's the same thing. When Walter Weiss talks about that deep state, he can't talk about how they are Jewish, but there's no change to his message. We're looking at the roots of the mindset of what Walter Weiss says. And Ted Wilson's worldview is connected to that. It's politically correct, but it's inescapable. By the way, Venturi, he survived a stabbing. He blamed the international enemies of Mussolini. The only comment I want to make on that stabbing was that the Catholics' issues with sexual abuse did not start in the last few years. And the police stopped digging because the young man who stabbed him was not an enemy of fascism, and it was personal. And I remember not just when she talked about this, but I think I read it in the book because I'm going through the Pope and Mussolini, but it was referencing pederasty. The Lateran Treaty, I don't want to go into much discussion of the Lateran Treaty because we know of it. Quoting Mussolini, having disposed of the prejudices of liberalism, I hope this is, I don't know if this is spelled right. I have it spelled in a different way in another page I found, but I didn't realize I had it until right now that they're spelled different. Duce, if that's how you say that. But it's referring to Mussolini, huh?
Duce. That was the nickname for Mussolini.
Okay, I should probably know these things, but I was not a history person until I came into the church, and then especially now. Okay, so I hear her
You're
say it.
doing good.
Okay, so I connected that it was talking, they're talking about Mussolini, that part, I just didn't know how to say it. Okay, so having disposed, and this is a quote, quoting Mussolini, having disposed of the prejudice of liberalism, the Duce explained, the fascist regime has repudiated the principle of separation of church and state. His government had worked hard to restore the character of being a Catholic state and a Catholic nation. So, according to Mussolini, the fascist regime has repudiated the principle, and we know that they hate, the church hates church, the separation of church and state. Okay, so here we have sitting at the front, Mussolini and Gaspari. And these are some of the photos from the New York Times from 1929, the Lateran Treaty. We can't quite read it, but under the photo of Pius XI, it writes that he has achieved the revival of the temple sovereignty of the Roman See. Again, from the New York Times, front and center is Mussolini and Gaspari. Church and state in accord, and you can kind of read that. If you're on your phone, you probably can't, but church and state in complete accord. So it wasn't hidden. 2 days after signing the Lateran Treaty, speaking to a group of university students, quoting from the document, perhaps the Pope told them it helped that one side was headed by a librarian, the Pope, and perhaps to what was needed was a man such as the one that Providence had us encounter, Mussolini, a man who did not share the concerns of the liberal school. Moving on from the Lateran Treaty, we don't have much time, but a lot to say. We've spoken before about 1888 and the document, How the Constitution Became Christian, and what was driving church and state together in 1888. Anybody? What was driving church and state together in 1888?
Morality?
Morality?
Protestantism.
Protestantism? Anybody else?
The issue of slavery,
1888?
a little late.
Think of the three structures. What causes them to mobilize?
Threat.
Group threat. And the group threat was the Jews, the Adventists, the Catholics, and the secularists. This is 1888 history. This is all, we've been through all this before. We demonstrated one of the threats was Catholic. They weren't friends. So let's come to Europe in 1932. In 1932, Mussolini visited the Pope. This generated worldwide coverage. We're not going to go into the sexism of the Vatican. Let's just say when a female international journalist turned up to report on it, she was not well received. This is the meeting between the Pope and Mussolini. After a minimum of pleasantries, Pius brought up the subject he thought most pressing. Protestant proselytizing, he told surprised Mussolini, is making progress in almost all of Italy's dioceses, as shown in a study that I had the bishops do. And he says that he was not expecting this to be the top of the agenda of this meeting. The Protestants are becoming ever bolder, and they speak of missions they want to organize in Italy. They're taking advantage of the concordance unfortunate language, which refers to non-Catholic religions as admitted cults. The Pope had opposed that phrase, preferring that they be described as tolerated cults. The Pope acknowledged that the Protestants were few, but argued that the threat was nonetheless great. He handed to the, how do you say that again? Duce?
Duce.
Duce. And that's why I have it spelled different.
Yeah, that's it.
A lengthy report on the question. Over the next years, he would bombard the dictator with requests to keep the Protestants in check. So you can put the Protestants under the list as a
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the slide previous, where it mentions the concordance language on the slide that you just passed.
On the previous one?
Just go back to the one before.
Right there?
When it says they're taking advantage, yes. They are taking advantage of the concordance's unfortunate language. Is that referring to the treaty they signed? That concordance?
That's what
That sentence
yeah.
there is that.
Yeah, because
So the language. Sorry.
Yeah, I know, it's okay. I always feel so bad for sounding like I'm cutting you off. The accords being the Lateran Accords, the treaty, yeah.
Okay, so in that concordance, that's where the language where they were able to oh
Right
shoot.
here.
Yeah.
In the middle.
But that is what they used, that language, but it says it the
Yeah,
Protestants are becoming ever bold.
In it, they use the language that refers non-Catholic religions as admitted cults, but the Pope had opposed that phrase, but that's what's in the concordance, if I understand correctly. The Pope opposed that phrase, preferring that they be described as tolerated cults. So it's
Yeah,
written
okay.
in there
Just
that they're admitted cults.
understood that part.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the Pope acknowledged that the Protestants were few, but argued that the threat was nonetheless great. And over the next years, he would bombard the dictator with requests to keep the Protestants in check. So putting the Protestants on the list here as part of the threat. And they're not friends, but Protestantism gives Catholicism glory when they emulate them. So we know that they're not friends, but Protestants give them glory when they emulate them. We saw that from when we were reading the A.T. Jones documents and the Catholic Mirror and how they pay homage to the papacy by keeping Sunday and doing as they do. The Pope added that he could understand the principle of totalitarian fascism, but this could only refer to the material realm. There were also spiritual needs, he said, and for these, what was needed was Catholic totalitarianism. So you've got totalitarian fascism, but what was also needed was Catholic totalitarianism. Finally, the Pope expressed his distress at what was going on in Russia, where he said the Bolsheviks were intent on destroying Christianity. Beneath this, said Pius, there is also the anti-Christian loathing of Judaism. When he was nuncio in Poland, I hope I spelled that one right. I looked it up, and that's kind of trouble. It seemed like it would be an easy word to find. When he was nuncio in Poland, he recalled, I saw that in all the Bolshevik regiments of the civilian commissars were Jews. And for me, not being the brilliant person here, I had to look that one up too. So commissar, if I'm saying it right, commissar is an English transliteration I'm not going to try to say the Russian word, which means commissary. In English, the transliteration commissar often refers specifically to the political commissars of Soviet and Eastern Bloc armies, or to the people's commissars, while administrative officers are called commissaries. So the group threat, you have Protestants, socialists, and Jews. There are many quotes for this, and I'm only quoting enough to make the point, and there's much more. Venturi played a part as well. He would spend years trying to convince Mussolini that a vast evil conspiracy led by Protestants and Jews was at work, aimed as much at the fascist dictator as the Catholic Church. He relied on a network of informants to feed him the latest news on the occult conspiracy. In June 1933, he sent Cardinal Pacelli a copy of one such report. That's an interesting statement, that he relied on a network of informants to feed him the latest news on the occult conspiracy. And so we're going to read, I think we're going to read the report. In 1933, he sent Cardinal Pacelli a copy of one such report. At the center of the government, that is in the ministries, there are high bureaucratic officials who are either Jews or Masons, who want the prefects to think that the clergy and the Catholics should always be considered as enemies. Instead of wasting their time investigating priests, he said, governmental authorities should be looking into the formidable, underhanded, subversive activities of the Jews, the Masons, and the Protestants, who, disguised as admirers of fascism, have become practically the feudal lords of Italy, as they never were in the past. Mussolini had to be warned. So we're seeing the threat. The charge that Jews were the evil force behind a worldwide conspiracy against Christianity and European civilization had long been heard in the Vatican. The Jesuits of La Civiltà Cattolica were among its most avid proponents. A feature article titled "The World Revolution and the Jews" had appeared in the Vatican Supervised Journal in late October 2022. As the fascists were marching on Rome, it described a world in chaos where secret forces orchestrated labor strikes and unrest in pursuit of the goal of the communist revolution. The credulous masses participating in the revolts were mere stooges manipulated by an occult power that showed telltale signs coming from the ghetto.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
So I don't know what the date's supposed to be. It says the Vatican Supervised Journal in late
Oh, it's not
October
supposed to be.
2022.
Yeah.
I know that's not the right date. I don't know what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, let me see if I can, well, I'll find it later and correct that, because it's definitely not supposed to be 2022.
That was confusing me. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks for catching it. I read it right through it. Okay, so I'll try to look that up afterwards, because it's in the, I have the transcript. And what page, I don't have what page we're on. Because definitely that's not the right date. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I probably distracted you all from what it says. So I'm just going to read back past from that part. As the fascists were marching on Rome, it described a world in chaos where secret forces orchestrated labor strikes and unrest in pursuit of the goal of the communist revolution. The credulous masses participating in the revolts were mere stooges manipulated by an occult power that showed telltale signs coming from the ghetto. So this is all conspiracy theories, right? The charge that Jews were the evil force behind a worldwide conspiracy against Christianity and European civilizations had long been heard in the Vatican. And the Jesuits of La Civiltà Cattolica, that was that art, the publication that they were putting out, were among its most avid proponents. So they were the ones feeding this conspiracy about the Jews.
it's interesting that we're actually studying the counterfeit here, and
Yeah.
how much the counterfeit has its, similar group threat and all this other stuff. So I have to remind myself that we're talking about the counterfeit, because when you try to really get into this, sometimes your head can swim.
Well, yeah, because I mean, we see what the conspiracy theories have done to the conservative Protestants. If that's where your mind is at, that's where my mind is at.
And what affects the conservative of Protestants also have affected, the broad swath of Adventism.
Yeah, yeah, all of them. And then how it says that the ones that were participating in the revolts were mere stooges manipulated by an occult power that showed telltale signs coming from the ghetto.
And in your previous slide, it said something about the pederasty,
I said
right?
that. It
And
didn't say it, but yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean, when it was referring to the stabbing, and that Venturi was trying to divert the attention,
Right.
right? And so in a way too, they were diverting the attention from investigating the sexual improprieties that were going on within the Vatican by pointing the finger at they had to have a target, they had to have somebody to go after too.
Yeah. So where before have you heard the idea that this occult empire foments chaos to create order? Anybody? That is the foundational point of most of Walter Weiss' arguments. And it's those Freemasons. Quoting, "The popes had long condemned Freemasonry, and one of the first things Mussolini had done to please the Vatican after coming to power was to declare Freemasons ineligible for membership in the fascist party." So you've got Protestants, socialists, Jews, and Masons. And Masons was what Walter Weiss went after in all of his teachings, order out of chaos. Coming back to racism, in the 1922 article, and that might have been the date there, Belle and Susan, and anybody else that caught that, might have been the date, 1922. Coming back to racism and the 1922 article in La Civiltà Cattolica, the leaders of the Bolshevik reign of terror were not indigenous Russians, but rather, quote, Jewish intruders. So they're saying that the leaders, this is what they're putting into their article, the leaders of the Bolshevik reign of terror were not indigenous Russians, but rather, quote, Jewish intruders, who slyly masked their true identity behind Slavic-sounding pseudonyms, if that's how you say that. In short, although Jews comprise less than 5% of Russia's population, this tiny minority today has invaded all the avenues of power and imposes its dictatorship on the nation. So that's in the article, La Civiltà Cattolica, in the publishing, in a 1922 article, that this tiny minority today has invaded all the avenues of power and imposes its dictatorship on the nation. This little 5%.
Threat of the minority.
Huh?
Threat from the minority.
Yeah, 5% of the Russian population is doing all this. All avenues of power. This 1922 article had significance. It was used by the Nazis as a central justification for their anti-Semitic campaigns. The next issue of La Civiltà Cattolica, the first to appear after Mussolini came to power, carried news from Austria under the headlines, Jewish Masonic Socialism Tyrannizes Austria. Following the Great War, the journal reported, Vienna's 19 Masonic lodges had formed a Grand Lodge. All of its high functionaries, without exception, were Jews. Their goal was to rule the world under the domination of the Masons, themselves under the Jews' power. If the Jews in Vienna got their way, the journal warned, Vienna will be nothing but a Jewish city. Houses and belongings will all be theirs. The Jews will be the bosses and lords, the Christians their servants. Austria will be absolutely the subject, tributary, and slave of the Jews. This, in short, is the guiding idea of our socialist Jewish Masonic leaders. It's just really interesting reading all this, because I definitely watch all of Walter Weiss's stuff. And for him to teach it and leave out the word Jew, one thing out, and you change everything. And that's a huge thing to leave out. To see how I don't know that I knew this much about how much I always knew they blamed the Jews for everything. But to the extent that they went, I don't think I ever understood. And maybe I still don't, but I definitely understand it more than I did. But they built this conspiracy against them. And it's interesting when you see the conspiracies today where they've taken the minds of people to bring them to the point where there are these mobs that marched on January 6th. And I was talking to a couple of my sisters, the ones that are both Trump supporters, but they're still kind of different in different ways. But the oldest one is kind of going through some really difficult times. But in talking to the other one, who's like a couple of years younger than her, but a few years older than me, we were talking about it and all the conspiracy theories, and she was saying how the oldest one lives in fear. And I was thinking when she said that about how the Republicans talk as if what the liberal side does is create all this fear. And yet I'm seeing one of my own sisters, and they're not alone, because you can see what happened on January 6th. They have all these fears, the fear of the government, the fear of the conspiracies, the fear of vaccines, the fear of the scientists, the fear of all these things. And I just told my other sister, I said, there's no hope in conspiracy theories. Because that
Walter Weiss's favorite sayings is "what if" and "could it be?"
Yeah.
He likes to insinuate that doubt. He's insinuating all these things left, right, and center, but there's nothing factual to back it up. But he does leave people with some ominous fear, of something looming that they can't see.
Yeah. So I took what she said. Go ahead.
It's funny you said that too, because I used to watch those also, and I used to get a jittery feeling after I'd watch some of those, like just, I don't know, kind of a nervous like feeling. You know what I mean? Yeah, it has an effect on your whole nervous system even. And I was reading an article the other day that teachers they don't know what to do because the kids that are coming into the classrooms are full of these conspiracy theories. And they don't know how to tell the difference. The kids don't, and the teachers are at a loss kind of how to instruct their students, right, on how to separate fact from fiction. And the students are repeating back these conspiracy theories. that they're picking up. And about COVID and the presidential election being rigged and all of that, they're just full of it. And so you see how it's just permeating through. And I think Linda posted something about banning of certain reads and how they're trying to ban certain teachings of history in the schools. And that's all that people are going to have in their mind are these conspiracy theories. And I think Elder Tess said that's one of the 144,000's biggest obstacles for us to overcome with people when we're trying to give this message and get the truth to them are these conspiracy theories, because they'll just be so full of them,
Yeah. And that a few slides back where it talked about it didn't say mob, I don't remember how it said it, but the ones that were, all infected by them and with marching. But anyway, so they're all deceived. They're all deceived. It made me think of all what we're seeing today. They're all deceived. But going on something you said, Susan, about making you feel unsettled. I don't know the words you used, unsettled, but because back, I still remember very vividly the very first week I started listening to him. Somebody gave me his testimony, and then I wound up on the website and was listening while I worked to most all of that whole series. And but at one point in time, and I don't remember which one it was, but at one point in time I was sitting there and I got really scared, and and the only way I could describe it was that it was if somebody said, look, this is Satan. You need to know who he is. And I was so shaken by that experience that I grabbed my keys and walked out of the house and went and wandered around the store for a little while to chill out. And I put my focus on the Bible and said, I need to stay away from that. And at one point, thought I needed to just balance it because I was believing that what he was saying was right. And I don't know that other than the Lord saving me out of it, but I knew there was hope in God. And maybe that's, when I'm thinking of what you said and then talking about my sister, it's like the hope is in God, and that and God, and my hope in God. I don't know if this is accurate to say, but my hope in God led me out of there. Because when I first started to study this message in very late 2013, the first thing I knew is this had to all go. That this was all not right. And it was the wrong place to put my attention and had to go. And then later we find out about the two streams of information. So yeah, I can resonate with that. And it brings no hope. It only breeds fear in people and then causes them to be so consumed by the conspiracy theories that they'll go and march for their leader.
Well, praise God for the truth, because it's only the truth as God leads us that what we can call fanciful theories or conspiracy theories, that they become exposed for what they really are.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah, I wanted to say something real quick, that one of the catches for us also with Walter White was he had like a lot of health messages too, which also was like, oh, wow, like he's on the right track.
Right.
But that was bad, because then that kept us listening to him. But thank God that finally Manuel was the one that started listening to Jeff Pippinger towards the end of that year, 2013 also. But now it's like we have to just unlearn a lot of that stuff, because when we hear stuff like that, it kind of, dwindles in your, dwells in your back of your mind because you heard it so much. So now you have to like clean your brain, it's like, okay, this stuff has to get out. Because like this week, it was so sad when I was listening to one of the preachers that had, he got COVID and died. But this commentator, or reporter, he was talking about how the people, like the membership people, they were saying like that he was like a martyr, like he died for the cause, for the right cause. He got COVID, but he was telling everybody about how all these conspiracy theories about the government and population elimination, all that stuff, so forth. So a lot of these people are so blind that they say like if they die, it's like that's great, they died for a cause, a
Yeah.
godly cause, which makes it even worse because like how are we going to talk to those people? It's like they just believe it so heartedly, and I think God is the one that's going to help. He's the only one to help us, how to say the right things, the right words, because it's just so difficult.
Yeah, and there's COVID, right?
I want to say our testimony. Hello?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, this is really interesting to hear how people have, I guess, gotten the truth and figured out Walter Weiss stuff. Because this was a long time ago, and I don't remember what year it was, but we, like at our church, had a prayer meeting and they showed a Walter Weiss testimony video. And then at some time later, a friend had us over to watch some Walter Weiss thing. I think it was a Sabbath afternoon. Well, what was going on back then was the first messenger, Jeff, we'd been really talking a whole lot, and it might have been the main influx was over with, but it was all about the daily. And that was just like a big subject in the movement then. And so anyways, we find out that Weiss on the wrong side of the daily. So we had only seen those two like films of him or whatever. And so we were like, well, if he's on the wrong side of the daily, boom, we're out of here. So we dropped him like a hot potato. And so I don't even know half of what in the world he went into and all, because Jeff, praise God, and those guys figured out right off the bat that this guy was whacked. And that's how it went back then. If somebody was not on the daily, you're not going to waste your time hanging around those kind of people. So that was sort of our testimony. But God is good. He's led us all away from that stuff.
Yeah, good for you. You were around in the message earlier. Yeah, I know that I wouldn't be here without the Lord leading.
Yeah, I was introduced to Walter Weiss, the same person who introduced me to Jeff. And I was just listening to him on my own. I don't believe I got through all his material, but I watched some of his things. And what tipped me off was the fact that he was promoting the idea that Islam and the Catholic Church were friends. And I knew that was off. And I didn't know if anything else he was saying was right or wrong, but I knew for certain that one was not right. So I totally disconnected from him after that point.
Okay, so back to the notes. If you remove the word Jews, just like people, now remove the words weight loss, you have Walter Weiss' whole prophetic message. And that's exactly what this sounds like, more now than it, I heard it when she first did it, and I heard it some when I was transcribing it, but I think I hear it more now than I did before. That truly was, I could hear his message in it. His whole prophetic message in what we're reading here today. And you could just as well get it from La Civiltà Cattolica. So is it justified for the Vatican to work with fascism in this history? They didn't like Hitler. They often hated Mussolini. But they're doing good things for the church, Hitler and Mussolini. Mussolini has lots of affairs. His private life is not moral. It's not about his personal morality. It's about what he does for the church. So you need to accept an immoral leader because the church is under threat. So you've got the church and here's the threat. And you wind up with an immoral leader because he's the one that's going to protect your church. It's the Catholic Church that will be oppressed if they aren't protected by the state. And where have we heard that before? Anyone?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, I already cheated and put the answer on there for you. It's the Catholic Church that will be oppressed if they aren't protected by the state. And where have we heard that before? 1888, today in this history. So Catholic Church will be oppressed if they aren't protected by the state. So they needed the state, which means they linked with fascism in order to protect the church. And we see that what they did in 1888, join the state. And also we see it today. I want to just touch on Australia for a moment. Australia has a fight right now. There's a controversial bill going through Parliament aimed at protecting religious people from cancel culture.
Cancer, you said?
Cancel culture.
What's cancel culture?
Yeah, could you explain a little bit about cancel culture, please?
Oh, you guys, I know what it is, but how to explain it, but they're trying to wipe people out for their, it's the Republicans, I believe it is, saying that you're trying to wipe us out, wipe out a culture, cancel the culture, cancel who they are, cancel what they believe in. Maybe somebody could do a better job than me.
Well, it's a ban on history, basically,
A what?
right? Because
Uh-huh.
it's like a ban on history so that you won't have a good understanding of history, because if we don't understand history, we can't understand where we are. So they're trying to undo like the education in the schools on racism and these topics, these hot topics,
Okay, so I got it. Thank you.
right?
Because you're way better than I did. I'm going to read it off my phone now. But I knew it had to do with because the Republicans are saying you're trying to cancel us out, but it goes both ways. Both sides, it seems like they're doing this, I think. But anyways, here's off of Wikipedia. Cancel culture or call out culture is a modern form of ostracism in which someone is thrust out of social or professional circles, whether it be online, on social media, or in person. Those subject to this ostracism are said to have been canceled. And Penny just sent, I don't know, did Penny put it in the chat too or no? I think that's what Penny just sent me. Yeah.
No, I didn't put it in the chat.
You did or didn't?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Let me pull it up because it's Merriam-Webster. The practice or tendency of engaging, thank you, because it's hard for me to do two things at once. The practice or tendency of engaging in mass canceling as a way of expressing disapproval or exerting social pressure. And it says, for those of you who aren't aware, cancel culture refers to the mass withdrawal of support from public figures or celebrities who have done things that aren't socially accepted today. This practice of canceling or mass shaming often occurs on social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So it seems like if I've been following things that the Republicans claim it's happening to them when they're actually doing it to others. if I said that right. They're crying about it happening, about them being canceled. Okay, did that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Uh-huh. I'm sorry, I try to look up, when I read words that it's like that I don't know either, and I go try to look them up, but that one I didn't catch in here to put it in here. Okay, so Australia has a fight right now. There's a controversial bill going to Parliament aimed at protecting religious people from cancel culture, from being canceled, from being ostracized. And this is a quote, among other things, it would allow Catholic schools the right to fire teachers or expel gay students in the name of religious ethos. The topic of religious discrimination has been at the center of several public debates in recent years, particularly in the wake of Australia passing same-sex marriage legislation in 2017. That triggered a government inquiry led by conservatives into whether religious groups felt their right to expression was being curtailed. Cases like rugby player Israel Folau being sacked from the National Wallabies side for saying on his Instagram that hell awaits gay people have also spurred the conversation. And I did put an article in there, or a link to this article. The problem is that the Prime Minister, Mr. Morrison, is a Pentecostal Christian who brought his pastor to the White House to meet Trump, and there's an election coming up. Quoting Mr. Morrison in the last paragraph, quote, many people from various religious traditions are concerned about the lack of religious protection against the prevalence of cancel culture in Australian life, he told Parliament on Thursday. So it's going against their religious freedom, if I'm following correctly, or their protection. It's only been a few years since gay people had a right to marry, and the fight is over who is oppressed. Is it the Jews or the Catholics? We're going to move on from that and hoping my questions were rhetorical by now. So the fight is over who's oppressed. So let's move on to Hitler. Pope Pius XI had doubts about the Nazis. He fought with Mussolini, sometimes publicly, humiliated Mussolini by talking about out of control nationalism. So we should expect Francis to have digs at Trump. You won't see how their goals align if you're waiting for evidence of a deep state occult friendship, which Adventism is waiting for this friendship of the two. If this is, trying to think this through, because Adventism is waiting for Protestants and the Catholics to unite, but they don't unite in the way that they think, in the way that they've been taught. They're not friends. The Pope too, this is back to the quote, the Pope too had doubts about the Nazis, but within weeks of Hitler's appointment, he began to have a more positive view. I've changed my opinion about Hitler, he told the surprised French ambassador. It is the first time that such a government voice has been raised to denounce Bolshevism in such categorical terms, joining with the voice of the Pope. Lots of Christians don't like Trump. They don't like everything he does. They may even dislike his racism, but they have to vote for him because he will fight against their threat. Neither Pope really liked or supported the Holocaust. It's not that simple. They didn't want the Holocaust. But who is going to oppose the group threat? Who else would protect Catholics? America wasn't. France wouldn't. Best option was fascism. But even though they didn't support the Holocaust, their belief system was still anti-Semitic. Semitic. This journal gives 3 solutions to the problem of the Jews. First solution, convert all Jews to Christianity. So first you could convert all the Jews to Christianity, but this was clearly not going to happen because they say that Jews stubbornly insist on remaining Jews. The second was you could relocate Europe's Jews to Palestine, but that won't work because the land cannot support all 16 million. And also, even if it could, Jews would never do the necessary work. For they were, quoting the journal, uniquely endowed with the faculty of being parasites. This is what the journal says. They're uniquely endowed with the faculty of being parasites and destroyers with no aptitude and no taste for manual labor. And they control the world, the banking system, and everything else, according to them. They give the third option, the only option remaining in their view, strip the Jews of their rights as citizens. In just one point, of the 417 members of the highest leadership bodies in the Soviet Union in the mid-1920s, only 6% came from Jewish backgrounds. And in the 1930s, that 6% figure dropped sharply because Stalin was anti-Semitic. And these are conspiracy theories. I wanted to go, but I won't for time, into a secret deal that Pius XI made with Mussolini in 1938. 40,000 Jews in Austria at that time were rounded up and placed in protective custody. And Italy was beginning to issue its anti-Semitic laws, and the Pope agreed with Mussolini that he would say nothing to interfere with what Mussolini was doing to protect his country from the Jewish threat in exchange for some Catholic favors. So they made this secret deal in 1938. Quoting, disillusioned and despondent, the Pope worried he had not been true to the sacred trust placed in him. He had let his patriotic sentiments as an Italian color his judgment. He vowed to do all he could in a little time left to make amends.
So, question: is this a conspiracy theory or fact?
I was going to ask you as we review this because I think we're almost done because I have questions on this too. It says these are conspiracy theories.
Right.
So I don't know if she's talking about the 3 suggestions, because that was what was in the journal, the 3 suggestions, or is she specifically talking about how few Jews there were? I think she's talking about the conspiracy theories that the Jews were ruling everything. Because that was weird.
Yeah,
That was weird.
when she said these are conspiracy theories, I don't know if she meant this statement or the statements after.
Yeah, I was a little troubled there too, other than we know that the blaming of the Jews and saying that the Jews were doing everything, because earlier she'd mentioned about their about only 5% of the in Russia being Jews, and saying that they're the ones that are ruling the world. So I don't know if she meant as an overall thing against the Jews. I might have to ask her. Unless anybody else has any insight on that. So there was 3 options that was in the journal. Unless it's just this part right here that maybe she means the conspiracy theories was just that there was 6% of these 417 people in the highest leadership. Maybe they weren't there. Is that what you were thinking?
I don't know. I was confused by the whole thing.
Yeah, okay. Well, that'll be a question that I want to maybe ask her and see if she can help me understand it, and then I give it back. But give me just a second to write it down. Okay. So unless it's, no, this isn't, it's not, it's got to be before, it's not this here, I don't think. Because she says she wanted to go, well, maybe she's saying that the secret deal was a conspiracy, but I don't think so. This goes along with what they were doing. Okay, so we read the quote. And he's feeling bad for what he participated in. Okay, so the problem by now is that Pacelli and lots of other leaders around him do not share his regret. And this is where I have a question when we get to the end, that to see how you guys understand what I'm not sure of it, something at the end here. But the problem by now is that Pacelli and lots of other leaders around him do not share his regret. They're still invested in fascism. It's coming up on the 10-year anniversary of the Lateran Treaty. Mussolini knows that they're going to celebrate that 10-year anniversary, and he's nervous about what Pius XI is going to say. And the Pope stops communicating with the other leaders about his speech, and they're all nervous. So we're going to skip a little, beginning with the London Daily Mail. Quote, the London Daily Mail published a story by its Rome correspondent claiming that Pius XI was planning a secret gathering of the cardinals to draft a winning denunciation of racism. Rumors spread that the Pope was preparing a secret encyclical with the same aim. So he's going to do a speech. Let's see, okay, a secret encyclical with the same, a winning denunciation of racism. The ailing Pope was showing signs of losing control of the church. He had long ruled with an iron hand. Those around him were frustrating his every attempt to prevent Italy from joining the Nazi cause. Those around him were frustrating his every attempt to prevent Italy from joining the Nazi cause. Convinced, continuing the quote, convinced he had not much longer to live, the Pope saw the upcoming 10th anniversary of the Lateran Accords as his final chance to address Italy's bishops. As the big event approached, the Pope's health worsened, but the Pope's mind was lucid and his voice still clear. He spoke rapidly as if he knew he had little time left and much to say. And that was the end of the quote. They didn't usually do this, but he had his speech printed, and it was to be given to the bishops to who were speaking. With his health, he wasn't sure if they were clear with every word. Not wanting to be misheard, he made sure there were many printed copies, but his health continued to crumble. At 5:31 a.m., the day before the speech was to be read, Pius XI passed away. The bishops had already arrived in Rome for the celebration that meant so much to the Pope. This is the 10-year anniversary. On the Pope's desk was the folder Humani Generis Unitas, rejecting the idea that a good Christian could embrace racism. It demanded an end of the persecutes to the Jews. It was Pius XI's fervent hope that such a statement be issued. And I did not say that this is a quote. I think you guys can see it, but anybody listening, this is a quote, the whole thing at 5:31, and he passes away. Okay, so it was Pius XI's fervent hope that such a statement be issued, but among those who survived him, many were eager to see it buried along with the Pope. So many of those around him wanted Italy to join with the Nazis. Continuing the quote, Pacelli moved quickly. On February 15th, he ordered the Pope's secretary, Pacelli, who then becomes Pius XII. Pacelli moved quickly. On February 15th, he ordered the Pope's secretary to gather up all the written material the Pope had produced in preparing his address. He also told the Vatican printing office to destroy all copies of his speech he had printed, copies that Pius had intended to give to the bishops. The vice director of the office gave his assurance that he would personally destroy them So that quote, not a comma, remained. So they want to completely erase where his mindset was and all that he had written about it, that he wanted to say and wanted to denounce racism, that Christianity is not racist. And he wanted to denounce all of that. And they want to, those around him, Pacelli included, want to erase and destroy all the documents that he had written, had printed. Quoting, the words the Pope had so painstakingly prepared in the last days of his life would never be seen as long as Pacelli lived. Only 20 years later, 4 months after Pacelli died, when Pope John the 23rd and one of his first acts released excerpts from the speech. Only with the opening of the Vatican archives of the papacy of Pius XI in 2006 has the world seen the full text. There are many quotes that we have now that show the link between the Vatican and rising fascism. I could read you all the racist quotes, but I don't want to distort the picture. It wasn't always that simple. And so quoting, Pius XII's supporters argued that Pius employed diplomacy to aid the victims of the Nazis during the war and through directing his church to provide discreet aid to Jews. I'm going to read that. I'm going to start that again because that might help me with the question I have coming up. So Pius XII's supporters argued that Pius employed diplomacy, and this is a quote, so I'd have to pull the book out later to try to find it. But Pius XII's supporters argued that Pius employed diplomacy to aid. Is this the same Pius? You sure?
No, I think this is the Pius XII of the Nazis.
Yeah, that's Pius XII. I got that. But is it saying Pius XII's supporters argued that Pius XII employed diplomacy to aid the victims of the Nazis, or is it Pius XII's supporters argued that Pius XI employed diplomacy?
I would think it's the 12th.
Okay, so then we'll read the whole thing and maybe it'll make more sense when we finish it. So Pius XII's supporters argued that Pius employed diplomacy to aid the victims of the Nazis during the war and through directing his church to provide discreet aid to Jews and others saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Pius maintained links to the German resistance and shared intelligence with allies. There's far too much evidence to believe such a glowing report. Okay, that answers my question that I had. That's the one that I had. So because we saw that, if I understood correctly, and anybody correct me if I'm wrong, Pius XI wants to denounce racism, right? Even though he participated in all of that, getting that, but didn't like where it went. And at the end, he's wanting to denounce racism. And then he dies. Pacelli comes in and wants to destroy anything that remotely said what Pius XI was about to do. And so now this is a quote that Pius XII's supporters arguing for Pius XII, that Pius XII employed diplomacy to aid the victims. So he's trying to make himself look good. Is that right? That he's trying to say that his supporters are saying that he aided the victims of the Nazis during the war?
Yeah, that's how I read it.
Okay, yeah, okay. So Pius maintained links to the German resistance and shared intelligence with the Allies. Okay, so now this sentence makes sense then. There's far too much evidence to believe such a glowing report, but there is a little bit of truth to it. Pius XI condemned Mussolini's nationalism the same way Francis spoke quite unkindly of Trump's nationalism. You're not going to find friendship between Catholicism or Protestantism or government. But if Italy had a constitution, you see them make it Christian because the issue is the group threat. The Alpha history and the Alpha history. Yeah, I hope I got that right, because now this one just goes on and says Pius XI. but there is a little bit of truth to it. Pius XI condemned Mussolini's nationalism. Okay, I think she's comparing, because Pius XI did condemn, we read that earlier, Mussolini's nationalism, whereas also, if I'm understanding this correctly, Pius XII supporters argued that if it's the 12th, that he actually helped the victims of the Nazis. I hope we have that right. Lots to, I gotta read, I have the book and I'm not getting fast, it's heavy reading for me anyways. Okay, so modern Israel history is slavery, and modern Babylon is the Holocaust, racism. Modern Israel and modern Babylon in a history where there's the 6 commandments and that are the test, when in the same history, now again, it's the 6th, and you have to ask yourself, now that it's gender, racism and anti-Semitism still exist, but the great test centers on gender. Do you want to respond like a Millerite or a Catholic? So modern Israel, slavery, which is racism, and modern Babylon is the Holocaust, which is also racism. In a time, modern Babylon in a history where it's the 6 commandments that are the test, when in the same history, now again, it's the 6th, and now you have to ask yourself, now that it's gender, racism and anti-Semitism still exists, but the great test centers on gender. Do you want to respond like a Millerite or a Catholic? You got slavery here and you got the Holocaust here.
So to that question, do you want to respond like a Millerite or a Catholic? What she seems to be asking is that the Millerites rightly opposed. They were abolitionists. They opposed directly, whereas the Catholic, because they can benefit from the friendship of the state, they became friends, but somehow in a backdoor way try to help those who are oppressed. That's what I understand this question to be when she asked, do you want to respond like the Millerite or like a Catholic?
Anybody else?
I think the Catholics were doing whatever was convenient for them, and so they're straddling the fence. They're on both sides, whereas Millerites were clearly on one side. And going back, several paragraphs back when you were questioning when Elder Tess was saying these are conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories is what held sway, and those conspiracy theories was that this vast Jewish minority was the one who was controlling everything, which led everything in the direction it went. I think that's the conspiracy theories that she's talking about is all the stuff that went against the Jews.
Anybody else? So do you worry about the church being oppressed by cancel culture? Walter Veith acts like a 1920s Catholic. It's 1920s Catholicism. Ted Wilson says it more nicely. If you want to know what they really believe, look to Ghana. All that Ghana is doing is taking to the logical conclusion what the organizational leaders and thought leaders in Adventism teach. And where is Ted Wilson's sermon speaking against his own leadership? Where is his sermon condemning the steps taken in Ghana? Everybody's familiar with what the church did in Ghana, right? The Seventh-day Adventist Church making, how did it say it? They support that, I don't remember the word, how it worded it, but that they support making homosexuality a crime.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, when she said Ghana, I thought she was referring to Jim Jones
Oh, yeah, no.
drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was the Seventh-day Adventist Church backing and supporting homosexuality being criminalized.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I do remember hearing about that.
Okay. So he might not personally like what they're doing. I'm sure he doesn't want to see homosexuals physically hurt, but you have to have sympathy for government. Sarcasm she was using. Trying to be moral. So you have to have sympathy for the government trying to be moral. In other words, homosexuality is a criminal act in the Bible, and you got to have sympathy for the government because they're trying to do the moral thing, trying to protect themselves from the group threat. So whether it's Ghana or Uganda or Australia, Adventism stands with modern Babylon, and they're about to be shipwrecked because right when on the subject of gender, they should be acting like a Millerite, they're acting like a pope. Did that help?
Yep.
So yeah, so they're on the side of the state.
Yeah. And that is why they failed the Sunday law. And it's not that the Catholic Church wanted all Jews to die. They just wanted them controlled to protect the Catholics, to protect the country. I hope we can see enough in what we've discussed tonight to see more clearly the problem with Adventism. When they say Babylon, it's those secularists, it's LGBTQIA, secularists, LGBTQIA, all those gender aberrations, the confusion of women that don't act like women, and I'll throw Catholics in there just to be proper. So you've got the group threat in 1888, you've got the group threat in 1932, and the group threat today is all those secularists, LGBTQIA, the confusion when women don't act like women, and Catholics. But they don't even know how to define what Catholicism is now because Adventism can't define Babylon. Like Laodicean, they're acting like Babylon. And the decision we have to make is what will we do with that? The church is not going to change for the better. People need to come out of it and act like a Millerite. So we'll read her prayer. Dear Lord, thank you that the events in this world's history are not invisible to our gaze. It's not a deep state occult that we can't see. I pray, Lord, that you will help us to come out of Babylon in our worldview fully and completely, not compromising, not longing for its leeks and onions, not loving the watered down sexism of watered down Babylon, cultural feminism, liberal feminism, that even the Pope can preach. May we stand as an example, especially in this time, to Adventism, that they can make the stand that saves their lives. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.